Hello guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the 5 biggest buyers and sellers at this year's NHL Trade Deadline. Now, being honest with you guys, looking over the past few years of deadlines, I feel like this year takes the cake for the most amount of concrete buyers and sellers we've seen in a while. A lot of teams are looking to add to their cores and push to the playoffs, and a lot of teams are looking to add to their futures. But across the entire NHL, who are the biggest buyers and sellers? Who will be the biggest players traded? And what can we expect at this year's NHL Trade Deadline? Watch till the end for the entire preview, and make sure you hit that subscribe button to the Sportsnet YouTube channel for the best sports coverage around. And without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, the first team I want to mention here is arguably one of the biggest buyers of this trade deadline, and that is the New York Rangers, a team who I think is going to make a flurry of moves at this deadline, and it all relates to those 5-on-5 woes. Even though this team is third in the Metro, they are going to make the playoffs because of Igor Shesterkin. There is still some 5-on-5 holes to fix, and especially come playoff time, they might get exposed and they aren't able to acquire anyone substantial. For the Rangers, though, I do have some good news. They have $9.9 million in cap space, a lot of options to work with, and I feel like there's 3 different guys they will target. First things first, Ben Sherratt from the Montreal Canadiens, who come playoff time has had a proven track record of physical success, likely a good option on that bottom pair, even if it will be costly. Also, Artturi Lehkonen, who I think will be an excellent depth option for the Rangers, would also likely cost a lot, but on a third line defensive role would be absolutely perfect. And then you have the big one in Joe Pavelski, who I think is one of the most underrated players in the NHL. I think is maybe the best player available right now as it is right now, and I feel like for the Rangers, they can get him and put him on a second line center spot. The Rangers could be one of the biggest contenders heading into the playoffs. Now we're going to move on from the biggest buyer to the biggest seller, and I don't even think this is a question that they will be the biggest seller of this trade deadline, and it has to be the Montreal Canadiens. I think Ken Hughes and this management team is ready to go scorched earth and lay down the framework completely for this retooling of the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, they've already made that Tyler Toffoli trade, which got them a first from the Calgary Flames, but they are not done yet. You got Jeff Petrie in play, who seems to be more likely as the days go by to be traded at this deadline. He will likely get a first from any team that wants a player with substantial term that can be on that defense consistently. You also got Ben Sherratt, who will also likely get a first-round pick. Artturi Lehkonen, who has supreme defensive results. Maybe the Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow of this trade deadline. He could get a first-round pick, or at least a great prospect for the Canadiens. You got even other players like Mike Hoffman, potentially Josh Anderson in play. This could be one of the most important trade deadlines for the Montreal Canadiens in their entire history, and again, laying down the framework of this rebuild. If they can get upwards of 4, even 5 first-round picks in this draft and the one after, it'll be a home run for the Habs and the rebuild that I think they truly need. But now moving on to the second buyer, and one of the biggest buyers for the top contenders, at least in the NHL, and that is the Florida Panthers, a team that I only have one little scare about, and that is with the salary cap situation. Now, they right now have $2.3 million free, but there is some flexibility there. They have Frank Vatrano, who's already kind of been in trade rumors already, making $2.5 million. If you trade him, then you got some extra money there. You also got Noel Acciari, who's around the $1.6 million range, has played like 2 games for them this year, and could likely be bought out or trade to another team for a pick or so, and that would be around the $6 million range of free cap space for them. So if they can get creative, I think they can get some massive things done. In terms of the players they'd be interested in, Ben Sherratt, who we talked about with the Rangers, I think would be a great fit for them, even though, again, he has lost the step. I think in terms of the Panthers and that defense, having some success playoff-wise and experience there, I think is valuable. Also, I think Claude Giroux would be a very interesting addition to this Panthers team, even though that would be a big swing. At the same time, adding him to that top 6, and especially the power play, would make that even more lethal. And also, the last one here is a bigger swing in John Klingberg, who might not be available, but if he is, I think the Panthers will definitely be in on him, especially for that power play and the proven success in the 2020 bubble. I think the Panthers will be all over him. And now going on to the second seller, and one of the weirdest teams really going into this next month in the NHL trade deadline, in the Vancouver Canucks. Now, I don't really know what this Canucks team is in the future, and I'm really not sure the Canucks really know either. They're trying to gauge their situation since JT Miller was in trade rumors and not in trade rumors and back in trade rumors and now not in trade rumors, but it feels like they are leaning towards keeping Miller for the long term and potentially trading other big pieces, Brock Besser and of course Connor Garland for instance, but you also got other smaller pieces like Tyler Mott and Yaroslav Halak who are basically guarantees to be traded at the deadline, but I do think that Besser will likely be the biggest, most likely option dealt. He would get a lot of value, and even though he's been inconsistent on this Canucks team, he'd have a lot of promise and a lot of potential since he is still pretty young and can be such a good goal scorer. He will get a lot of value, and I think the Canucks are likely going to deal him. But now we're going to go on to the third biggest buyer of this trade market, one of the more underrated buyers, I think, of this trade market as well, in the Nashville Predators. Now, they have done way better than I would have ever thought, being around that middle parts of the Central Division, but still being a strong contender this season. A lot of that is due to because of Duchesne and Johansson being much better, and UC Saros being a Vezina candidate. And I feel like for the Preds, a lot of the reason why they will be a buyer this year is because of the pending UFA status of Philip Forsberg. I feel like for the Preds, they really want to show that Forsberg belongs in Nashville, that he should stay in Nashville for the foreseeable future, and they're good enough to pay him handsomely. And I feel like for the Preds as well, they might add some more long-term pieces. One that comes to mind is Brock Besser, who I think on the wings would be a perfect fit for that Preds team. They might also add a defenseman potentially. If they want to go for a big swing, Jacob Chikrin would be a pretty good long-term option. Hampus Lindholm is also available potentially from the Ducks. There are some good options there, but I feel like for the Preds, even if they might go big or low, I think they will be a buyer and use that cap space very well. But now going on to the third seller, and another team that has to really decide their fate, I think, at this trade deadline, in the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, obviously, the big one is Claude Giroux, who decides his fate with a full no-move clause. He could stay for the Flyers, and they could still go in a rebuilding direction. They have a lot of different pieces they could deal. They have James Van Riemsdyk, who has a $7 million cap hit for this year and next. Hasn't been all too great this year, but at a retained cap hit, a player that's had some great proven history, can bang in goals in front of the net, especially on the power play with ease. That's a player I think a lot of teams would like to have. A player like Oscar Lindblom has also kind of been in rumors this season, but the defense I think is where most of the moves are going to come from. Rasmus Ristolainen is pretty much a lock to be moved, but you also have Justin Braun, who I think could be a pretty under the radar player who's done a decent job defensively this season for the Flyers. You also have Keith Yandel, who will be a rental too, and you'll most likely see Martin Jones as well trade at the deadline. A lot of smaller players being dealt, but a lot of valuable guys as well that the Flyers could get a lot back for. But now moving on to the fifth buyer, a team that I think could be extremely interesting in the next 30 days, and that is the Minnesota Wild, a team that I honestly think could be one of the bigger buyers of this market. Just like the Panthers, the biggest struggle is that salary cap. They have $3.6 million right now, which isn't horrible, but they also have less potential dump options than the Panthers do. I know that sounded really funny, but you know what I mean. When it comes to the Wild, though, I feel like they have some holes they could fill. If they want to go big and bold, even though Kaapo Kähkönen has still been pretty solid this year, going for Marc-Andre Fleury would be insane for them and could fit in terms of the playoff structure they have. I think in terms of the forward group, I still don't think that having Frederick Gaudreau as your second line center is going to be ideal for their situation. I feel like obviously a Joe Pavelski, if the Stars were to trade him, which I don't want to see happen, but I feel like it would be an absolutely perfect fit, would be amazing for the Wild. There are some other options out there, like the Winnipeg Jets potentially trading Andrew Kopp. He would also be perfect for that Wild team, but I feel like a potential top six centerman, a potential goalie could be in play for the Wild to go after if they so choose, but again, that cap hit is really the only thing holding them back. Now I'm going to move on to the fourth seller, and in my opinion, this team is the most underrated team selling-wise going into this trade deadline, and that is the Chicago Blackhawks. I feel like they will go full dumpster fire and trade a bunch of core pieces at this deadline. I don't think it'll be a Patrick Kane or a Jonathan Toews, but you will see Marc-Andre Fleury dealt. Big playoff history there. I think Brandon Hagel will be dealt as well. He's a player that has a super low cap hit and is a really good forechecking middle six player, but you also other players like Dominik Kubalik, who are great scoring forwards when they are on their game, who I think will be traded to a pretty strong contender that can use them on the power play and in the right situations. You also got Dylan Strome, you got Calvin DeHaan in that defense, who is a pretty easy rental, has been decent so far this season and can help a lot of playoff teams. There are just a lot of good, solid pieces that will be dealt by the Blackhawks. Nothing insane, but Marc-Andre Fleury obviously headlines that conversation. But now we're going to move on to the fifth buyer in today's list, the buyer that is, I think, the lowest lowest in the standings as of right now in the LA Kings, a team that I think is honestly going to go pretty hard at this deadline, try to get some playoff revenue in that first round. I think when it comes to the Kings, are in an interesting spot. Right now, they're second in the wild card race. They've won 2 straight. They're 6-2-2 in their last 10, and they have some pretty big momentum. And I feel like for the Kings, they'll definitely want to capitalize on that. But unfortunately, just like the Panthers and some other teams out there, they have some pretty big cap space issues. They have 2.3 right now, but they could also trade Athanasiou and get $2.7 million off the books, which definitely frees some big cap there. So you'd be around that $5 million range, and I feel like for the Kings, that's enough to work with. Now, there has been a lot of rumors throughout this year that the Kings want to add to that defense, and if they do make a big move, I think it'll come onto that D core. I feel like, personally, Ben Sherratt, we've been talking about a ton on this entire video, but he's a guy that's going to get a lot of interest and is going to get a lot of different suitors at least checking in on what he's worth. And I feel like for the Kings, they might be one of those teams that considers that worth it, and especially for that D core that, with Alex Edler out especially, lacks some playoff experience. I feel like Ben Sherratt would be perfect and would bring some good physicality there, but also I feel like they could potentially add more long-term. Jacob Chikrin's a guy that they've been watching for a very long time, and I feel like if anybody at this point is going to trade for him at this deadline, it will be the LA Kings. So I think it'll most likely come on defense, but there are a lot of options for the Kings to seek out. But now we are going to go on to the 5th seller to talk about today, and we've talked about some pretty good sellers throughout this video, but in terms of actual quantity, I don't think anybody is beating this 2022 Arizona Coyotes team. Holy mama, are they going to have a lot of busy moves to make. They have so many different guys in terms of rentals that teams will likely kind of want. There's not that many amazing gangbuster options besides Chikrin, who will likely be dealt, but you got Phil Kessel there. You also got a ton of forwards that could be dealt, like Lawson Krause, who a ton of teams love. You could potentially see Anton Roussel dealt. You could see Travis Boyd, Alex Galchenyuk, Riley Nash potentially out. You could see Christian Fischer as well gone. In terms of the defense, you got Anton Stroman there. You got obviously Chikrin, maybe even Shane Gostisbehere is a part of trade discussions. There are so many different options for this Coyotes team, and they're making sure while they plan ASU that there's just no stars to be had there, which is a bold strategy, and we'll see if it works out for them. I'm still hoping to get that arena though, because it is so funny how this Coyotes team is run. Now, the thing is, the Coyotes do have 8 picks in the first 2 rounds of this upcoming draft, so I can't really complain too much. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the Sportsnet YouTube channel, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Comment down below, what do you guys agree and disagree with my buyers and sellers picks? What do you guys see your team being, a buyer or a seller, and what are your buyers and sellers for this upcoming trade deadline? Let me know all your thoughts. Share this video with your friends. Get all the trade deadline info out there, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic day, and goodbye.